The transport ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and 20 human soldiers pressed their faces against the small windows to catch their first glimpse of Kepler Station. The massive structure stretched across space like a metallic flower, its petals reaching out in all directions. Each section housed different alien species, and right now it looked more intimidating than any battlefield they had ever seen. Alex Reed adjusted his uniform and tried to calm his nerves. As the mission commander, he couldn't show any weakness in front of his team. The Galactic Defense Coalition had chosen Earth's best soldiers for this exchange program, but Alex knew they were walking into the unknown. 3 months of learning alien combat techniques from species that had been fighting wars across the galaxy for thousands of years. The docking bay doors opened with a sharp hiss, and the humans stepped onto the station. The gravity felt wrong, lighter than Earth but heavier than the moon training they had done. Strange smells filled the air, a mixture of ozone, metal, and something that reminded Alex of burning flowers. "Welcome to Kepler Station," a voice buzzed from speakers built into the walls. "Human delegation, please proceed to Bay 12 for orientation." Their guide turned out to be a floating orb covered in blue lights. It bobbed ahead of them through corridors lined with windows showing the depths of space. Other beings moved through the halls, and Alex tried not to stare. A group of tall, silver creatures with too many joints glided past without making a sound. Something that looked like a walking crystal formation clicked and chimed as it moved in the opposite direction. Bay 12 was a large circular room with seats arranged in a pattern that didn't quite make sense to human eyes. At the center stood their instructor, and Alex felt his stomach drop. The being was roughly humanoid, but covered in what looked like black armor plating. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in hands with too many fingers. Its head was triangular, with compound eyes that seemed to look in multiple directions at once. "I am Captain Thrix of the Vorthak Defense Corps," the creature said, its voice coming from somewhere in its chest rather than its mouth. "For the next 12 weeks, you will learn combat techniques that your species has never encountered. You will train with energy weapons, zero-gravity fighting, and battlefield tactics that have been perfected over millennia." One of the human soldiers, Emma Cross, raised her hand. "Sir, what's our success rate supposed to be? How do other species usually perform in training?" Captain Thrix's compound eyes focused on her with what might have been surprise. "Success rate? You train until you are adequate. Most species require 6 months to achieve basic competency with energy weapons. The crystalline beings need 8 months for zero-gravity combat. You have 12 weeks for everything." "But what if we learn faster?" asked Tom Willis, a sergeant with more combat experience than the rest of them combined. "What if we want to understand how the weapons actually work instead of just following procedures?" The captain's 4 arms moved in what Alex guessed was either confusion or irritation. "You will follow established training protocols. These methods have been tested across 47 different species over the course of 2,000 years. There is no need to understand the underlying principles. You need only to execute the techniques correctly." Alex noticed several other aliens in the room, apparently observing the orientation. A creature that looked like it was made of living metal stood near one wall, its surface reflecting the lights in strange patterns. In another corner, something resembling a giant mantis with wings folded against its back watched with large, multifaceted eyes. "Your first lesson begins in 1 hour," Captain Thrix continued. "You will be divided into groups of 5 and assigned to different instructors. Each will teach you the combat specialties of their species. You will learn Vorthak close-quarters combat, Eschatar thermal warfare, Nixari echolocation fighting, and crystalline energy manipulation. After the orientation, the humans were given time to settle into their quarters. Alex's room was small but functional, with a bed that adjusted to his body shape and a window showing the endless stars. He found himself wondering what they had gotten themselves into. The first training session took place in a room with walls that seemed to absorb light. Captain Thrix demonstrated the proper grip for a Vorthak energy weapon using all 4 arms in a complex pattern that looked like a deadly dance. The weapon itself was unlike anything Alex had seen, more like a controlled lightning bolt than a traditional gun. "Observe the stance," Captain Thrix said, positioning his 4 arms at precise angles. "The energy flows through specific channels in the weapon. Disruption of the pattern results in weapon failure or explosion." Emma raised her hand again. "Why, those specific angles? Is it because of the energy frequency? Or is there something about the weapon's internal structure that requires that positioning?" The captain's compound eyes seemed to dim slightly. "The angles are correct because they have always been correct. You will practice the stance until it becomes natural." But Alex could see that Emma wasn't satisfied with that answer. None of them were. Throughout the session, the humans kept asking questions that seemed to frustrate their instructor. Why? Did the energy weapon need to be held at exactly that angle? What would happen if they modified the grip slightly? Could the technique work with only 2 arms instead of 4? By the end of the first day, Alex realized that the other alien species in the program never asked these kinds of questions. They watched demonstrations carefully, practiced the movements exactly as shown, and gradually improved through repetition. The humans, on the other hand, wanted to know the reasoning behind every technique. "This is troubling," Captain Thrix reported to his superior that evening. "The humans demonstrate adequate physical capabilities, but they refuse to accept proper instruction. They question techniques that have been perfected over centuries. They want to know why instead of simply learning how." "Are they progressing in their training?" the superior asked, slowly. "Their insistence on understanding rather than copying may hinder their development. I recommend strict adherence to traditional teaching methods." What Captain Thrix didn't mention in his report was something that had begun to worry him. When the humans practiced the techniques, they didn't just copy them. They seemed to be analyzing them, breaking them down into component parts, and occasionally making small modifications that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. Alex lay in his bed that night, staring out at the stars and thinking about the day's training. Tomorrow they would learn zero-gravity combat from the Nixari, and he had a feeling that his team's questions were just getting started. Something told him that this exchange program was going to be much more complicated than anyone had expected. The zero-gravity training chamber hummed with artificial gravity generators that could be turned on and off at will. Emma Cross floated near the ceiling, her legs bent at an awkward angle as she tried to master the Nixari combat technique. The bat-like instructor, Instructor Vel, hung upside down from a metal beam and demonstrated the proper wing sweep motion that would disable an opponent's weapon. "Feel the air currents." Vel clicked and whistled, the translator converting the sounds into words. "Use the environment as extension of body. Nixari have evolved for 3-dimensional combat over millions of years." Emma watched carefully as Vel twisted through the air, using wing membranes to change direction instantly. The movement was beautiful and deadly at the same time, but Emma's human brain was working differently than Vel expected. "What if someone doesn't have wings?" Emma asked, pushing off from the wall to float closer. "I mean, what if they needed to create the same effect using just arms and legs?" Vel's large ears twitched with what might have been confusion. "Impossible. Wing structure provides necessary surface area and flexibility. Other species learn to approximate technique, but never achieve true effectiveness." Emma spent the next hour practicing the basic movements, but Alex could see her mind working on something else. During their break, she cornered Tom Willis and Danny Kim, 2 of their most experienced fighters. "Look, what if we're thinking about this wrong?" Emma said, sketching diagrams on a portable tablet. "The Nixari use their wings to create air resistance and change direction. But humans have something else. Really fast reflexes and the ability to process multiple inputs at once. Danny looked at her drawings with interest. You mean instead of trying to copy their wing movements, we figure out how to achieve the same result using human advantages? Exactly. Watch this. Emma pushed off from the wall again, but this time she moved differently. Instead of trying to sweep through the air like a Nyx Ari, she used quick, precise movements of her arms and legs to change direction. Her reflexes, faster than most alien species, allowed her to make multiple small corrections instead of one. Large wing sweep. Holy hell, Tom whispered. That actually worked better than what the instructor was showing us. Word began to spread among the human trainees. During the Escatar thermal combat session, Lisa Zhang discovered that human eyes could track heat signatures more efficiently than the reptilian species had expected. Where the Ciscatar used slow, methodical movements to track thermal changes, Lisa learned to snap her head from target to target, processing heat information much faster. This is not correct technique, hissed instructor Sesteth, the 7-foot-tall, reptilian combat expert. Thermal tracking requires patience and careful observation. Rapid head movements cause missed targets. But Lisa had already spotted 3 thermal signatures that the traditional method would have taken much longer to find. Her human brain, evolved to spot dangers quickly while hunting on Earth's plains, could process the thermal information and move on to the next target faster than the instructor thought possible. The real breakthrough came during energy weapon training with Captain Thrix. Emma had been thinking about the Vorthak 4-armed technique for days and finally decided to test a theory. Captain, what would happen if someone cycled the energy weapon faster than the standard rate? She asked during a practice session. Weapon overload, possible explosion. Energy weapons require precise timing between shots to prevent catastrophic failure. Emma nodded, but Alex could see the wheels turning in her head. After the official training session ended, she stayed behind in the range with Tom and Danny. They spent 2 hours experimenting with the weapon cycling, starting with tiny variations and gradually increasing the speed. Look at this, Emma said, showing them her results. Human reflexes are fast enough to feel the weapon's energy cycle. I can sense when it's ready for the next shot, even if it's faster than the recommended timing. She fired the weapon in rapid succession, much faster than any of them had been taught. Not only did the weapon not explode, but the rapid fire created a devastating effect that could overwhelm most defensive systems. This is insane, Danny said, trying the technique himself. We're doing something that should be impossible according to their training manuals. Meanwhile, Tom had been working on adapting the Vorthak close combat techniques for 2-armed humans. The traditional method used all 4 arms in a complex pattern. But Tom realized that humans could achieve similar results by using momentum and leverage instead of multiple limbs. See, the Vorthak technique is all about overwhelming the opponent, with attacks from multiple angles, he explained to the others. But humans can create the same overwhelming effect by using physics. If I pivot here and use my whole body weight, I can generate the same force as 2 Vorthak arms. By the end of the 3rd week, something unprecedented was happening in the WA training facility. The human soldiers weren't just learning alien combat techniques, they were modifying them. Emma's rapid-fire energy weapon technique was being practiced by half the team. Tom's momentum-based close combat adaptation was proving more effective than the traditional 4-armed method. Lisa's rapid thermal scanning was identifying targets that took other species much longer to spot. The alien instructors began to notice that training sessions with humans were becoming unpredictable. Techniques that had been taught the same way for centuries were suddenly being questioned and changed. The humans would listen to a demonstration, practice it a few times, and then start asking questions that led to modifications. They are contaminating the pure forms, Captain Thrix reported to the station commander. Combat techniques are passed down through generations because they represent the optimal method for each species. These humans are introducing chaos into perfect systems. But the station commander, a wise old being called Administrator Kef, was more interested than alarmed. Are their modifications effective? That is not the point. Effectiveness is not the only consideration. Purity of technique, respect for tradition, and proper learning protocols are equally important. Administrator Kef pulled up the training records on his screen. Human progress was faster than any species on record. Not only were they learning the basic techniques quickly, but their modifications were showing remarkable results in simulated combat scenarios. Perhaps, Administrator, Kef said slowly, we should observe more carefully before we judge. These humans may be teaching us something about our own techniques that we never realized. Back in the training chambers, the humans continued their experiments. Danny had figured out how to combine Nixari three-dimensional movement with eschatar, thermal tracking. Lisa was working on mixing crystalline energy manipulation with Vorthak rapid strike techniques. Emma had started teaching other species her rapid-fire energy weapon method, much to Captain Thrix's horror. Alex realized that they had accidentally become students and teachers at the same time. The humans were learning alien combat techniques, but they were also showing the aliens new possibilities that no one had considered before. The question was, what would happen when the alien instructors realized that their students had become innovators? And what would the rest of the galaxy think when they discovered that humans weren't just learning alien combat techniques, they were improving them? As Alex watched his team practice their hybrid techniques, he had the feeling that this exchange program was about to become much more significant than anyone had planned. The sparring chamber vibrated with a low hum as the energy barriers activated around the combat area. Danny Kim stood at one end, wearing the standard training armor that felt too bulky for his small frame. At the other end, a crystalline warrior, named Quartz-77, waited motionlessly, its body looking like a walking diamond sculpture that caught and scattered the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns. "Standard engagement rules apply," announced Referee Bot, a floating mechanical device with multiple sensors. "Non-lethal force only. Combat ends when one participant yields or is rendered unable to continue." Danny had been looking forward to this moment for weeks. The crystalline species were known as the galaxy's most defensive fighters, able to create energy shields and barriers that could stop almost any attack. Their training focused on patience, endurance, and wearing down opponents through superior defense. The combat began with Quartz-77 immediately generating its signature defense, a shimmering energy net that surrounded its body like a second skin. The technique was supposed to be unbreakable, a perfect defense that could absorb energy weapons and deflect physical attacks. Danny tried the standard approaches first. He fired his energy weapon at different angles, trying to find a weak point in the barrier. The shots were absorbed harmlessly. He attempted close combat, but the energy net pushed him back every time he got close. This was exactly how the exercise was supposed to go. The crystalline warrior would maintain its perfect defense while Danny exhausted himself trying to break through. Eventually, Danny would be forced to yield, learning the lesson that some defenses cannot be overcome through direct assault. But Danny's human brain was working on the problem differently than expected. He had been watching the energy net carefully, noticing small fluctuations in its surface. The barrier wasn't actually solid, it was made up of thousands of tiny energy fields working together. During his fourth failed attack, something went wrong. Danny was moving backward after bouncing off the energy net when he tripped over his own feet. As he fell, he instinctively reached out to break his fall, his arms flailing in what looked like a completely random pattern. What happened next shocked everyone in the chamber. Danny's flailing motion, combined with a modified version of the Vorthak striking technique he had been practicing, created a series of rapid impacts against the energy net. But it wasn't the impacts themselves that mattered. The timing and frequency of Danny's desperate movements accidentally matched the resonance frequency of the crystalline energy matrix. The energy net shattered like glass. Quartz-77 stood frozen for a moment, its diamond-like body reflecting, the chamber lights without the protection of its energy barrier. In over 300 years of combat, no one had ever broken through a crystalline defensive matrix by accident. Combat terminated, announced Referee Bot. "Defensive system failure detected." The sparring chamber fell silent. Danny picked himself up from the floor, looking confused and embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break anything. Did I do something wrong with the equipment?" Captain Thrix, who had been observing from the viewing area, rushed into the chamber with several other instructors. They surrounded Quartz 77, running scanners over its body and checking the chamber's energy systems. "Impossible," clicked Instructor Vel, the Nixari combat expert. "Crystalline defensive matrices cannot be disrupted by physical contact. The energy frequency is specifically designed to repel all known attack patterns." Quartz 77's voice came like the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The human-created resonance disruption. Combat frequency matched matrix harmonics. Defense grid collapsed due to sympathetic vibration." Alex and the other humans gathered around Danny, who still looked completely bewildered. "I have no idea what I did," he said. "I was falling, I panicked, and I just started flailing around trying to catch myself." "Show us exactly what you did," Alex said, his commander instincts kicking in. If Danny had accidentally discovered something important, they needed to understand it. Danny tried to recreate his falling motion, but couldn't quite manage it. The movement had been pure instinct, a panicked reaction that combined his recent training with natural human reflexes. Lisa Zhang had been recording the sparring session for review purposes. She pulled up the video and slowed it down, studying Danny's movements frame by frame. "Look at this," she said, pointing at the screen. "Danny's arms are moving in a pattern that's almost like the Vorthak rapid strike technique, but modified for someone with only 2 arms instead of 4. And the timing? It's much faster than any of us have been practicing." Emma Cross, who had become the group's expert on energy weapons, studied the recording with technical interest. "The crystalline defensive matrix works by creating interference, patterns that cancel out incoming attacks. But what if someone could match the frequency of the matrix itself? The interference would work in reverse, amplifying the disruption instead of preventing it." Tom Willis, watching over her shoulder, whistled softly. "So Danny accidentally found the exact frequency needed to break their perfect defense?" "That's impossible," said Captain Thrix, who had been listening to their conversation. "Crystalline defensive frequencies are classified information known only to the highest levels of their military. A human cannot simply stumble upon such knowledge through random movement, but the evidence was right there on the recording. Danny's desperate flailing had created a specific pattern of impacts at a precise frequency that caused the energy matrix to collapse." Word of the incident spread quickly through Kepler Station. Within hours, representatives from multiple species had arrived to witness a demonstration. Danny found himself in the uncomfortable position of being asked to recreate something he didn't fully understand. The second test was set up with even more monitoring equipment. Quartz 77 agreed to participate again, though its crystalline features seemed to express what might have been nervousness. This time, Danny tried to recreate his movements deliberately. He studied the video recording, practiced the motion in slow motion, and worked with Emma to understand the technical aspects of what had happened. When the test began, Danny approached the energy barrier and began the movement pattern he had analyzed. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, the barrier flickered and collapsed again. The viewing area erupted in conversation. Species that had been allies for centuries were suddenly questioning fundamental assumptions about combat and defense. If a human could accidentally discover how to break crystalline defenses, what other impossible techniques might be possible? "This changes everything," Administrator Kef said, watching the test results with growing concern. "The crystalline defensive matrix is the foundation of our defensive strategies throughout the galaxy. If it can be defeated by a technique that humans can learn..." 3 days later, Lisa Zhang managed to replicate Danny's technique during her own sparring session. She had studied the recordings, practiced the movements, and approached the problem with the systematic thinking that humans seemed to excel at. Her success proved that Danny's discovery wasn't just a lucky accident. It was a reproducible technique that other humans could learn and master. The ramifications were enormous. The crystalline species had built their entire military doctrine around the assumption that their defensive matrices were unbreakable. Trade agreements, territorial boundaries, and defense pacts throughout the galaxy were based on the superiority of crystalline defensive technology. Now, after less than a month of training, humans had accidentally discovered how to neutralize what was considered the most advanced defensive system in known space. Captain Thrix filed an emergency report to the Galactic Defense Coalition headquarters. The subject line read, "Immediate review required. Human combat innovations pose strategic implications." Meanwhile, the human trainees continued their regular practice sessions, unaware that their accidental discovery had started a crisis that would reshape military thinking across dozens of worlds. They were too busy working on their next project, figuring out how to combine Danny's frequency technique with Emma's rapid-fire energy weapons. The Emergency Council chamber aboard Kepler Station had never hosted so many high-ranking officials from different species at once. Admiral Keth of the Coalition Defense Force sat at the curved table, her blue-scaled skin reflecting the chamber's lights as she reviewed reports on her tablet. To her right, General Mox, a towering being covered in what looked like living metal, tapped his clawed fingers impatiently against the table surface. "Explain to me again how 20 primitive humans have managed to disrupt 3,000 years of established combat doctrine," Admiral Keth said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets across multiple star systems. "Captain," Thrix stood at the center of the chamber, his forearms moving nervously as he tried to explain the situation. "The humans do not simply learn our techniques. They deconstruct them, analyze the underlying principles, and then reconstruct them in ways that should not be possible." "Should not be possible, or were not previously considered?" asked Dr. Venth, the Coalition's leading expert on military science. The elderly scholar's 6 eyes blinked independently as he studied the data streams flowing across multiple screens. "The distinction is important," General Mox rumbled, his metallic voice echoing in the chamber. "If these humans have found flaws in our methods, we need to understand how and why." Admiral Keth activated the chamber's main display, showing video, recordings from the human training sessions. "Let's examine the evidence systematically. Show me this frequency disruption technique first." The recording played, showing Danny Kim's accidental discovery of how to break crystalline defensive matrices. The council members watched in silence as the supposedly unbreakable energy barrier collapsed under a human's panicked flailing. "Random chance," declared Representative Quartz Prime, speaking for the crystalline delegation. The being's voice chimed like struck crystal. "Impossible to reproduce consistently." "Then explain this," Dr. Venth said, switching to a recording of Lisa Zhang successfully replicating the technique 3 days later. "And this." Another recording showed Tom Willis teaching the method to 2 more humans, both of whom mastered it within hours. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. This wasn't a single lucky accident. Humans were systematically learning to break techniques that had been considered unbreakable for millennia. "There's more," Captain Thrix said reluctantly. He activated a new display showing combat simulation. Results. "The humans have begun combining techniques from different species. They use Esakatar thermal vision with Nixari 3-dimensional movement. They blend Vorthak rapid strike patterns with crystalline energy manipulation." Admiral Keith leaned forward in her chair. "That should be biologically impossible." "Each species' combat techniques are specifically adapted to their physical and neurological capabilities." "That's what we thought," Dr. Venth said, pulling up detailed analysis data. "But humans appear to have a unique cognitive flexibility. Instead of trying to copy our techniques exactly, they identify the core principles and find ways to achieve the same results using their own biological advantages. The display showed a complex chart comparing human performance to other species across different combat scenarios. The results were disturbing for everyone, except the humans themselves. They're not just learning faster than other species, General Mox observed, his metallic features showing what might have been concern. They're improving our own techniques. Impossible. Representative Quartz Prime chimed again. Our combat methods have been perfected through millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of refinement. Watch this, Dr. Venth said, showing a recording of Emma Cross demonstrating her rapid-fire energy weapon technique to a group of Vorthak trainees. She's teaching our own species a more effective version of their traditional method. The recording showed Emma explaining how human reflexes could sense the weapon's energy cycle, allowing for much faster firing rates than the traditional Vorthak technique. Several Vorthak trainees were successfully learning her method, achieving firing rates that exceeded their species' previous records. This is disturbing on multiple levels, Admiral Keth said, studying the data. If humans can improve our techniques, what does that say about our military capabilities? What does it say about our understanding of combat itself? Captain Thrix activated another display showing the most recent development. Yesterday, Major Foster demonstrated something we're calling hybrid combat fusion. He combined techniques from 4 different species into a single fighting style. The video showed Major Ryan Foster moving through a complex combat scenario with fluid grace. He used Escatar thermal vision to identify targets, Nyx Ari 3-dimensional movement to navigate the battlefield, Vorthak rapid strike techniques for attacks, and crystalline energy manipulation for defense. The combination should have been impossible for any single being to master. How is he processing all that sensory and motor information simultaneously? Dr. Venth asked, studying the data streams showing Foster's brain activity during the demonstration. That's the problem, Captain Thrix replied. We don't know. Human neurology shouldn't be capable of integrating such diverse combat systems, yet they're not only doing it, they're teaching other species how to attempt similar integrations. General Mox stood up, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. Are you telling me that these humans are accidentally revolutionizing galactic combat doctrine? It appears so, Dr. Venth said quietly, and the implications extend far beyond military applications. If humans can intuitively understand and improve systems that we've considered optimal, what other areas might benefit from their perspective? Admiral Keth called up the latest reports from across the coalition. I'm seeing requests from 17 different species asking for human combat instructors. The Thermal Legion wants to learn Emma Cross's energy weapon techniques. The Crystal Guard is asking for training on counter-frequency methods. Even the Shadow Fleet is interested in human stealth adaptations. This is spreading too quickly, Representative Quartz Prime said, his crystalline form flickering with what might have been anxiety. These humans are contaminating established military doctrine across the entire coalition. Or improving it, Dr. Venth countered. The combat effectiveness ratings from species that have trained with humans show consistent improvement across all metrics. Admiral Keth looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Each species had sent their highest-ranking military officials, and she could see the concern on their faces. The carefully balanced power structures of the galaxy were built on the assumption that each species had specific military advantages that others couldn't replicate. We need a full-scale test, she decided. I want a comprehensive combat evaluation comparing traditional coalition forces with units that have been trained using human-modified techniques. That could be dangerous, General Mox warned. If the human methods prove significantly superior, it could destabilize military balances that have kept peace for centuries. And if we ignore this development, we could be unprepared for enemies who might discover these techniques independently, Admiral Keth replied. I'd rather deal with controlled change than chaotic surprise. Dr. Venth pulled up logistics data on his screen. I can organize a war game scenario within 2 weeks. Multiple species, diverse combat environments, quantifiable results. Do it, Admiral Keth ordered. But I want complete documentation of everything. If we're about to witness a revolution in galactic military science, I want to understand exactly how it happened. As the council session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Captain Thrix remained behind with Dr. Venth. "What do you think we're really dealing with here?" Captain Thrix asked. Dr. Venth's 6 eyes blinked thoughtfully. "I think we're seeing what happens when a species that evolved to be adaptable encounters systems that evolved to be perfect. The humans aren't trying to be better than us at our own specialties. They're finding ways to combine our specialties in ways we never imagined. And that's dangerous? That depends on whether you think change is dangerous," Dr. Venth replied. "But I suspect that after this war game, military doctrine throughout the galaxy is going to look very different." Meanwhile, back in the training chambers, the human soldiers continued their practice sessions, unaware that their experimental techniques were about to be tested on a scale that would determine the future of interstellar warfare. The pattern repeated across multiple engagements. Fleet Alpha's units, using techniques perfected over millennia, found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by opponents using methods that had been developed in a matter of weeks. Major Ryan Foster led a strike team that demonstrated the full potential of human-influenced combat doctrine. His mixed species unit moved through the asteroid field like a single organism, each member using hybrid techniques that complemented the others perfectly. Eschatar thermal specialists provided targeting data to Nixari flight units, who used modified three-dimensional movement to deliver precision strikes guided by crystalline energy manipulation systems, all coordinated through communication networks that employed Vorthak rapid response protocols. "How are they coordinating so effectively?" Admiral Keth asked, watching Foster's unit dismantle a heavily fortified position that should have taken hours to breach. "The humans taught them to think systemically," Dr. Venth replied, studying the tactical data. "Instead of each species operating as separate units with specific roles, they're functioning as integrated systems where each member's abilities enhance the others." By the 6-hour mark, the war game's outcome was becoming clear. Fleet Beta had achieved objectives that Fleet Alpha couldn't counter using traditional methods. The mixed units weren't just winning individual engagements. They were demonstrating a level of tactical flexibility that made them nearly impossible to predict or counter. Final tally shows Fleet Beta achieving victory conditions in 87% of engagement scenarios, Commander Rex announced as the war game concluded. Fleet Alpha maintained superiority in only 13% of encounters, primarily in situations that prevented effective coordination between mixed species units. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. The most advanced military forces in the galaxy, using techniques refined over thousands of years, had been decisively outperformed by units using methods developed by humans in less than 2 months. "This changes everything," Admiral Keth said quietly. "Every strategic plan, every defense treaty, every military alliance in the coalition is based on assumptions that no longer appear to be valid." Representative Quartz Prime's crystalline form seemed dim with what might have been resignation. "Our defensive matrices were the foundation of our civilization's security. If they can be routinely countered, then we adapt," General Mox interrupted, his metallic voice carrying a note of determination. "If these human techniques are genuinely superior, then we need to understand them and integrate them into our own forces." Dr. Venth pulled up communication logs from across the coalition. "It's already happening. I'm receiving training requests from 43 different species. Everyone wants human combat instructors." Alex watched the post-game analysis with a mixture of pride and concern. His team had accidentally started something much bigger than a simple exchange program. They had fundamentally changed how the galaxy thought about combat and military cooperation. "What happens now?" Emma asked, studying the tactical reports that showed their techniques being analyzed and discussed by military experts from dozens of worlds. "Now we figure out how to teach what we've learned," Alex replied. "Apparently the galaxy wants to know how humans approach problems." Over the following weeks, the Human Combat Innovation Institute was established aboard an expanded Kepler station. Alex and his team found themselves at the center of a revolution in military thinking that extended far beyond simple combat techniques. Species that had been rivals for centuries began training together, learning to combine their abilities in ways that created capabilities none of them could achieve alone. The rigid military hierarchies based on species-specific advantages gave way to flexible integrated units where diversity became a strategic asset. Lisa Zhang established the Hybrid Tactics Division, teaching species how to analyze and combine different combat systems. Tom Willis created the Adaptive Combat School, focusing on techniques that could be modified for different physiologies and environments. Danny Kim became the head of Frequency Warfare Studies, exploring how his accidental discovery could be applied to various technologies beyond defensive matrices. Emma Cross found herself in the unexpected position of being the galaxy's most sought-after weapons instructor, teaching rapid-fire techniques to species who had used the same firing patterns for millennia. The real revelation came 6 months later, when Dr. Venth published his analysis of the human impact on coalition military effectiveness. Combat casualties had dropped by 60% across all member species. Mission success rates had increased dramatically. Most significantly, 3 major interstellar conflicts had been resolved through negotiation rather than warfare, as potential aggressors realized that the coalition's new hybrid military capabilities made traditional conquest strategies obsolete. "The humans didn't just teach us new combat techniques," Dr. Venth reported to the Coalition Assembly. "They taught us how to think differently about cooperation, adaptation, and the creative combination of diverse abilities." Admiral Keth, addressing the assembly from the main podium, summarized the transformation that had occurred. "What began as a simple cultural exchange program has become the foundation of a new era in galactic military science. The human approach to learning and innovation has given us capabilities we never imagined possible." Alex stood at the observation deck of the Human Combat Innovation Institute, watching training sessions where beings from dozens of different worlds worked together, using techniques that combined the best aspects of each species' natural abilities. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year ago. "Commander Reed," came a voice behind him. He turned to see Administrator Kef, the station's original commander, approaching with what looked like a collection of official documents. "Yes, sir?" "These are formal requests for human military advisors from 87 different coalition worlds," Administrator Kef said, setting the documents on a nearby table. "It seems your species has accidentally become the galaxy's foremost experts on adaptive combat doctrine." Alex looked through the requests, seeing familiar names from species they had trained with and many others they had never encountered. "I'm not sure we're ready for this level of responsibility." "Perhaps not," Administrator Kef agreed. "But readiness and necessity don't always align. The galaxy has changed because of what you and your team discovered. The question now is whether you'll help guide that change or let it develop without human input." As Alex considered the weight of the decision, he realized that the wild consequences of teaching humans alien combat had only just begun. The techniques they had learned and modified were spreading across the galaxy, creating new possibilities for cooperation and defense that no one had anticipated. The exchange program that was supposed to last 3 months had become a permanent institution. The students had become teachers, and the teachers had learned that sometimes the most profound innovations come from questioning assumptions that everyone else takes for granted. Looking out at the training chambers where the future of galactic military cooperation was being written, Alex understood that the most important lesson hadn't been about combat techniques at all. It had been about the power of human curiosity, adaptability, and the willingness to ask why, even when everyone else was content with how. The galaxy would never be the same, and somehow, that felt exactly right. Wargame Arena stretched across, an entire asteroid field with floating platforms connected by energy bridges and gravitational wells that could shift combat from 0G to heavy gravity environments in seconds. Admiral Keth watched from the command center as two massive fleets prepared for the most comprehensive military evaluation in Coalition history. Fleet Alpha represented traditional Coalition forces, crystalline defensive specialists, Vorthak assault troops, Eschatar reconnaissance units, and Nix-Ari air support, each using combat techniques refined over thousands of years. Fleet Beta consisted of mixed units that had trained with human instructors for the past month, using hybrid techniques that combined multiple species' abilities. "All units report ready," announced Commander Rex, the wargame coordinator. "Arena systems active. Victory conditions. Complete control of the central command platform or elimination of enemy command structure." Alex Reed stood with his human team aboard the Fleet Beta command ship, watching as species that had never worked together before prepared to fight using techniques that shouldn't have existed. Emma Cross was coordinating with a mixed unit of Vorthak and crystalline soldiers, teaching them how to combine rapid-fire energy weapons with mobile energy shields. Tom Willis had trained a group of Nix-Ari in modified close combat techniques that used their flight advantage in completely new ways. "This feels surreal," Danny Kim said, monitoring sensor readings from a team of Eschatar who were using his frequency disruption technique to interfere with enemy communications. "6 weeks ago, we were learning their basics. Now we're teaching them things they never knew they could do." The war game began with traditional opening moves. Fleet Alpha's crystalline units established defensive positions while Vorthak assault groups prepared to strike key targets. Eschatar reconnaissance teams spread out to gather intelligence, and Nix-Ari air units took high positions for battlefield oversight. Fleet Beta's response looked chaotic by comparison. Mixed species units moved in formations that defied traditional military doctrine. A group of crystalline soldiers used modified defensive matrices to create mobile shields, while Vorthak fighters used Emma's rapid-fire techniques to lay down covering fire. Eschatar thermal specialists worked with Nix-Ari flight units to create three-dimensional reconnaissance networks that could track enemy movements in real time. "Fleet Beta is using completely non-standard tactics," reported the tactical analysis officer, a being whose job was to predict battle outcomes based on established patterns. "I cannot calculate probability matrices for combat formations that don't exist in our databases." Admiral Keth studied the battle displays with growing fascination. "Then we're about to learn something new about combat itself." The first engagement occurred when Fleet Alpha's main assault group encountered one of Fleet Beta's mixed units defending a strategic platform. The traditional Vorthak assault should have overwhelmed the smaller defending force within minutes. Instead, the defenders used a combination of techniques that created a devastating surprise. They employed Danny's frequency disruption to collapse. The attackers' energy shields followed immediately by coordinated fire using Emma's rapid weapon techniques. The assault group found their defenses failing while facing firepower rates they had never encountered before. "Impossible," muttered General Mox, watching his carefully planned assault dissolve in less than 3 minutes. "Those defensive positions should have held against that level of firepower." "They would have, using traditional methods," Dr. Venth observed, analyzing the combat data in real time. "But the defenders combined crystalline energy manipulation with Vorthak rapid strike techniques. They're generating more firepower than their numbers should allow while maintaining defensive capabilities that exceed standard parameters."